Hi, so my name's Flip. I play on Earthshaker EU, guild leader of No Plan B. I've played a Druid for 15 years. Obviously, various re-rolls, etc. in between, but I always end up back on a Druid. It's a good class. In Classic, there's some flaws. I mean, there's obviously common misconception that all a Druid can do in Classic is heal. Arguably, for the majority of people out there, yep, that's probably right. It's easier to heal than it is to DPS as Feral. I would say it's probably easier to DPS on any class. I'm probably going to get shot down for saying this, but I would say Feral DPS in Classic is one of the more challenging rotations, but not just that. It's probably the least forgiving as well. If you mess your rotation up at any point, odds are pulling back from it, especially if you're trying to pass, is going to be very difficult. So, a bit about me. So, I played a good standard in a very good guild. Our current best performances on Warcraft logs, I believe, is 99th percentile on every boss, I want to say. Might be the odd one where it's 98, I don't know. So what we're going to talk about basically is the overview of the class. So that's really the boring stuff which you probably want to skip through. So what races you can be, what specs there are. I'm going to talk a bit about talents, add-ons, stats, consumables, rotation and macros. I'm leaving rotation quite close to the end because a lot of the other things tie into it. So add-ons, for example, I use add-ons that I've never seen anybody use on YouTube. I mean, they've got lots of users, but I've not seen anyone make a feral guide that uses them. One in particular is called Here Kitty, which I personally, on a rogue, a feral druid, a lot of classes, even in retail, can utilize Here Kitty. I couldn't raid without it because I don't want to be looking at combo points. Here Kitty is audible, so you hear when you get a combo point, you hear when you get a crit. If you don't hear anything, you know you're maxed on combo points, which I'm not suggesting that you should wait till you hear nothing, but you know when you're going to hit that 4 or 5 mark so you can be ready to use your finisher. So yeah, overview wise, obviously what can you do as a druid, what can you be as a druid, so you can be a Tauren or a Night Elf, so Tauren for Horde, Night Elf for Alliance, but as I said before, you probably already know that because odds are if you're watching a Feral DPS guide, you've already created your character, possibly already 60, maybe you're playing Resto at the moment and you want to try Feral DPS but the numbers are not there. That's what I'm going to help you with. So obviously you can be Balance, which is range DPS as Moonkin. Actually performs relatively well on really short fights with really good burst. Not something I personally would play because I find pressing Starfire over and over again pretty boring. You got Resto, so obviously that's really, I would say the vast majority of druids in Classic probably are Resto. They seem to get sort of tunneled into being the healer, which they do perform at very, very well. I don't want to take anything away from Resto Druids, but I personally would rather take a Paladin or a Priest, but I would say Paladin because you gotta love that blessing of might. And then Feral, so tanking where in vanilla was considered meme spec or just not viable. Private servers sort of changed that over the years, and now tanking as a feral druid is perfectly acceptable. You can get very high health pool, very high armor, so for heavy sort of mitigation fights it's brilliant. You're going to hear a lot about manual crowd pummeler from Gnomragon during this video. Using that as a feral tank, threat wise, nobody will get you anywhere near you. So manual crowd pummeler gives you 50% haste. It's incredible. So yeah, even as a tank druid, but I don't want to talk too much about that. And then obviously feral DPS, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I personally absolutely love feral. Feral DPS, that is. Can't stand tanking. As I say, I'm one of these who needs a little bit of a challenging rotation just to keep my mind active. And feral cat definitely does that for me. So then if we look at talents is quite, I'd say, probably the only downside as feral cat specific DPS, because you haven't really got any options. If you're going for the absolute you know, just pure DPS, PvE DPS, this spec that is on screen now, this is the way to go. If you could change something, you could get improved Wrath if you wanted to get improved Wrath over Nature's Grasp, but there's absolutely no logic to it whatsoever. You have to go down to the balance tree to get Omen of Clarity. Large portions of your damage come from Omen of Clarity. Getting those clear casting procs and using them on free shreds, which is lovely. You want to get Natural Shapeshifter, just because this is what you're going to be doing. If you want to play a Feral DPS, you will be shapeshifting very regularly, and when I say regularly, pretty much every third global cooldown. And then in obviously Feral Combat, you're going to take the top 2 trees because that's reduced energy cost and increased damage with Ferocious Bite, which is all you're going to be using. For obvious reasons, I will briefly touch on it though, you won't be using bleeds in raids unless your raid leader is retarded, and then maybe he'll let you, but you wouldn't want to anyway. Ferocious Bite is definitely more damage. Obviously the bleeds are good sustain, but the bosses, particularly in Molten Core at the moment, are probably very close to 0 armor. With, you know, especially if you're using, you got someone in the raid using Annihilator, you've got Fairy Fire, maybe improved exposed armor over Sunder armor. So yeah, the bleeds are good on high armor targets, which they don't exist anyway. As I say, you're going to be getting some nice juicy sort of 2.5 to 3k ferocious bites, which are lovely to see. You're obviously going to take the movement speed outdoors while in cat, so Feral Swiftness. Feral Charge, no brainer, you're going to take that, and you should actually be using that now and again, just as that clutch interrupt, you know, in certain situations. Sharpen Claws, you have to take that for the 6% crit. Why wouldn't you take it? But you need it anyway to get down to Blood Frenzy, so every time you crit, you get an additional combo point, which is lovely. Predatory Strikes, again, obviously you're going to take it. It's not a massive game, but you need to take it to get down to Heart of the Wild. Improved Shred, absolute must. Savage Fury, again, a must really, because it increases your damage by Claw. And occasionally you will be throwing some Claws out. Again, very situational, but you will find you use the odd Claw on certain encounters. Feral Fairy Fire, yes, you will take it. Will you want to use it? Personally, no. If you've got Resto Druids, or if you happen to have a laser chicken in the raid, get them to use Fairy Fire. People would argue this, but Fairy Fire does give threat. So as a DPS, why would you want to get more threat when threat is already a problem? I promise you now, if you were playing your Feral to a good standard, you will have threat issues, particularly if you're Horde and you haven't got Hand of Salvation. Sorry, Blessing of Salvation. So you, even no matter how minor the threat is that you get from Fairy Fire, it's threat that you really don't need. So yeah, but we'll touch on that a bit more later. Heart of the Wild, obviously you're going to take that. Amazing talent. Leader of the pack, yeah, 3% crit. Your warriors are going to be jizzing over you trying to get into your group to get that 3% crit. And then over in Resto, Fura. And again, an absolute must, because you will be shapeshifting a lot to get the extra energy gain. You'll find out more about that when we're looking sort of at the gear and the pre-raid bis, the raid bis. The one thing I'll say, I probably should save this for when we're talking and looking at the gear, is gearing as a Feral Druid is quite rubbish. If you're thinking you're going to get in raids and get loads of purples, you probably will, but you'll be taking them for off-spec. There's very few items, certainly in Molten Core, very, very few. Blackwing Lair, again, very limited, and the items that you're going to be going for are highly, highly contested, such as Drakefang Talisman is one that comes to mind. So if you're using a DKP system, you're going to be laughing, because you only want a couple of items. They're going to be taking their tier, they're going to be taking their weapons, stuff like that. Obviously you don't need weapons, because you'll be farming Gnomragon every minute of the day. You don't need tier, because it's aimed at healers. So the items that you actually want, you'll get, hopefully, fairly quickly. And even if you're on a loot council, I would hope that, you know, the loot council appreciate the fact that all these other classes are going to be taking lots of gear, and you're waiting for one specific item. So the specific item, you know, people people will not realise how good you can be or how good you already are as a Feral Druid until you start performing and you're in raids. Because it's still classed as a meme spec. People don't understand it. I've been, I more or less, there's some exceptional warriors, etc., that are in the guild that sort of beat me on damage in dungeons and things like that. But the majority of the time, a short fight, boss fight in a dungeon, I'm rarely not on top. Saying that, it does happen, but I've had people tell me I can't join their pug dungeon because I'm a Feral Druid. I heal or nothing, which is that's rubbish. We know that's not a thing. Some of the top performing Feral Druids are doing insane numbers. Arguably, yes, warriors, rogues should be beating them, but if you are, which if you're not now, you will be once you've watched this video, hopefully, an exceptional Feral Druid, doing everything right, using the proper add-ons, macros, consumables, doing everything you can, you will keep up. You might not be on top, but you will certainly be in maybe the top 4 or 5 in a 40-man raid comfortably. So now, I probably rambled on a little bit too long there anyway, so I just want to just briefly talk about add-ons. Now, I've watched a lot of guides. I do a lot of driving for work, so I have YouTube on pretty much all the time. So I watch guides, even if they're rubbish or I think they're rubbish. Apologies if I think your videos are rubbish. I'll still carry on watching it just because there can be just that hidden gem somewhere, where you're like, oh, do you know what? I never thought about that. Even in one of the most ridiculous videos you've ever seen, something good can come out of it. And if you think this video is rubbish, the one thing I really hope you take away from it is Here Kitty. So we're talking about add-ons now. Here Kitty, if I could only pick one add-on to raid with as a Feral Druid, it would be that. I'd happily have everything else turned off, use the standard Blizzard UI, which I would hate. I mean, you can look at my UI here now. It's quite clean. It's, I don't click anything. The only thing I click is Gift of the Wild, Omen of Clarity, and Thorns. That's it. Everything else, obviously, is keybound, so I don't need to see it. So it's a very clean UI. But I could live without that. I could use the Blizzard UI and get by just fine. But Here Kitty, I almost feel handicapped without using it. So I absolutely urge every single Feral Druid in the community to go and get Here Kitty, because it will change how you play. So you don't need to look at your combo points anymore. I don't care where it is on the screen. When you start progressing in these harder raids, I'll say Blackwing Lair. Blackwing Lair is going to be a step up in difficulty, but if we go harder than that, we start looking at AQ, Nax. You're going to be concentrating on mechanics, so you can't spend time looking at combo points. And if you're not getting a chance to look at your combo points, odds are you're ferocious biting when you've got 3 points, or you've been on 5 points for 10 seconds, but you're paying so much attention to what you're doing. You're still over generating combo points that you now can't use. Here Kitty solves that. You will hear every single combo point you gain. It will make you a better player. So that's as I say, if you can take anything away from this video, please let it be that. Try it. In the comments, tell me if you think it's good, if you think it's bad, whatever. I'm sure there will be people who are like, oh no, that's annoying, I can't hear that noise during my raids, but you should persevere. As I say, I couldn't play without it. But anyway, each to their own. So add-ons, I'm going to go Feral specifically. I'm not going to talk about Atlas loot or anything like that. Or even bars to a certain extent. A lot of people use Dominoes or Bartender. I personally have Bartender on in the background, just doing a few things, but still not really relevant. For a Druid, what you need is classic cast bars. I'll put the links to these in the description if you haven't got them already. So classic cast bars, so you can actually see when people are casting, blah, 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 and you can go in bear, quickly charge in, get an interrupt off. Decursive, even though you're Feral DPS, you're not going to want to decurse, but, you will have to at some point. So might as well get used to it. Get decursive. Druid bar. Druid Bar Classic is the one I use. I'm sure there's plenty of them. You could even set up Tell Me When or Weak Auras to do the same thing. Druid Bar Classic, so you can see your mana when you're in bear form or cat form, which is a requirement. Here Kitty, I've spoke about that, so I've probably spoke about that too much. GTFO, again, not feral specific if I'm honest, but you know, just helps with that audible notification that you're standing in something that's bad. Other than that, honestly, the rest is all customizable stuff. So, weak auras, there is a brilliant weak aura, so you can see exactly how many power shifts you've got left. So when you get down to 1 on that last shift, maybe you want to use the major mana potion power shift macro. When you get down to 1 again, you might want to use the demonic rune power shift macro. We'll be going into all this soon, but basically what I'm referring to is when you power shift out of cat and back in for the energy gain, you also take a potion or a rune at the same time to put your mana up, and it's all all in 1 second basically. So you lose no combat time. And then obviously deadly boss mods. As I say, there's loads of add-ons I could talk about, but I really wanted to just speak specifically about what you should be using as feral. Okay, so let's move on to stats. So briefly, here is what sort of the stat priority should look like. So a couple of things I want to really go over is strength. Obviously, because of Heart of the Wild, you get 20% extra strength. So if you look here, if I take these off for a second, attack power 610. So 610. If I put them on, 690. So I'm getting 80 attack power from when you look at it there, from 33 strength. So reason being, we get 20% additional strength. So 20% of 33 is about 7. So it's actually putting us up to 40 strength. Explains why we're getting 80 attack power. So strength is really strong. Even though it's strong, agility is still arguably stronger. Reason being, we get crit. So we get crit from agility as well. So you do get some other passive benefits, but we don't really care about that. So 20 agility for a feral druid actually gives you 20 attack power. Yeah, because you only get 1 point of attack power per agility, but it would also give 1% crit, so and 1% dodge. Bit of survivability is nice, but basically every 20 agility is 1% crit as well as 20 attack power. Now, because we generate an additional combo point when we crit, we want to crit a lot. So agility, a high agility piece is, in my opinion, more valuable than a higher strength piece. Problem is, at the moment, the itemization's a little bit poor, so sometimes you'll find yourself using high strength pieces like those braces that I showed you a second ago, because they're too nice to pass up. Obviously, getting 80 attack power from one piece is lovely. And I'd also like to point out that your hit rating and your crit chance are quite closely tied together as well. So your potential of critting, I'm not going to go too much into the maths, but basically your potential of critting, particularly on auto attacks, is significantly lower with a lower hit rating. So if you're hit capped, your crit gains more benefit as well, because you're going to your actual theoretical crit cap will go up because you're hitting more. So as I say, there's plenty of resources out there on the maths behind it. All I'm telling you is get yourself hit capped. Now, consumables. This is a lovely topic. You will spend a lot of time farming as a feral druid if you want to keep up with everyone, or preferably beat them. So I'm going to count world buffs and consumables and tie it all together. So me personally, before every raid, I'm in Diamol doing a tribute run. Get that 200 attack power, which is absolutely massive. When you actually 200 attack power for 20-minute Diamol run where you make a bit of gold as well. Absolutely do it. Get the 15% stamina buff from there as well, obviously, because more survivability, more chance of keeping your world buffs, and obviously Elixir Head, which I'd imagine the majority of servers have got, a Discord channel where it's quite well sort of coordinated, so you can more or less know when an Elixir Head buff is going to go up. Yeah, definitely world buffs are massive if you want to perform and outperform other feral druids. Yeah, so consumable wise, so Elixir and Mongoose, obviously an absolute must, should have it on at all times. 25 agility, so you're getting over 1% crit and 25 attack power. And you're also getting another 2% chance to crit. So 3% crit from one Elixir plus some attack power, absolutely lovely, definitely have loads of these. The next one, Ground Scorpock Assay, I mean, this is really going for it. I mean, I personally would recommend having this on. But, I always do. So go over Blasted Lands, do a bit of farming. Again, this is another 25 attack power and 1% crit. Why wouldn't you? There's not that much content at the moment, so you might as well go and do some farming. The JuJu, so might and power. So you got 40 attack power and 30 strength. So those come from the echoes that you get from Winter Spring, from the Frostwolf Giants and the Furbowl little Winterfall village people. So yeah, definitely have those. You should all be engineers, hopefully, if you're really trying to push damage. So Goblin Sapper charges, which you can use a macro. So you just part of your normal power shifting routine. You've got a Goblin Sapper charge in there for a bit more bonus damage. Really good on cleave fights because it's the only cleave you're going to have. And just going back to the Blasted Lands buff, actually, because you can only carry one in your inventory, an option is actually to do two of the quests, so you can get Roids, which is 25 strength. So you could always pop that first, and then hand in for the Ground Scorpock, and then have that in your inventory ready to pop when the Roids run out. I'd imagine the majority of people are pretty much clearing Molten Core in an hour to 90 minutes. But for Blackwing Lair, definitely having 2 hours of full buffs is definitely worth doing. You'll want greater fire protection potions. I'm not going to go over the ones that are not really specific to feral. You should know you need free action potions, restorative potions, all those things for certain bosses. When it comes to food's quite interesting as well, because you can stack grilled squid and the fire breath chili as long as you eat the grilled squid first. Because then when you pop Dragon's Breath chili, it won't actually it won't overwrite it, so you'll get both. And then alongside the grilled squid, you can then pop like Elixir of Firepower, a Greater Arcane Elixir, to get that extra little bit of spell damage boost on the breath as well, which is again negligible, but if you're only like 2 DPS behind whoever's on top, that potentially is going to make the difference. And then I'm going to have one. I class it as a consumable. Alright, it's a weapon, but to me it's a consumable because after pretty much one boss fight, you're throwing it away and equipping a new one. So that is the illustrious manual crowd pummeler. It's best in slot for feral for. Well, let me work this out. Oh wait, forever. Well, certainly up until TBC anyway. So. Yep, 50% attack speed, 30 seconds it lasts, and there's no cooldown. So you can back-to-back 3 charges, a minute and a half fight of 50% haste. Absolutely overpowered. Also gives a nice bit of attack power. The actual stats from a stat stick perspective are quite good. So no reason not to always have, plenty of these on you. Even if you're doing dungeons, I have farming sessions where I just get loads and loads of these. I mean, on average, I've probably got 30 in the bank, I suppose. Yeah, definitely, you must have these. If you want to go that little bit further, like I do, iron counterweights work for your feral cat form. So if you've got a blacksmith friend, you can trade him a bunch of iron counterweights, and he can pop them on all your on all your manual crowd pummelers. And you're now, instead of a 1-1 speed cat, you're a 0.9 second speed cat, which again seems minor, but you know, if you're trying to push out as much damage as you can, why not? So rotation. Now, this is probably the interesting bit. You know, how do I play my feral? There's a few things. I'm not going to sit and go through every ability for a feral druid because you know a lot of them are bloated spellbook. You know, the stuff that you're not going to use. The main things that you're going to use in a raid is, depending on whether you're the only druid or not, is Fairy Fire, Tiger's Fury. Again, I've seen guides on here where people have said you don't even need to learn Tiger's Fury. Totally disagree, 100%. There are opportunities for Tiger's Fury on multiple boss fights. Barangeddon, to be fair, every single boss as you're running in. Any where you get downtime, if you're at 100 energy for well more than a second, you're wasting that energy. So use Tiger's Fury as a filler. You know, if you're running back to the boss, you're on 100 energy. You know you're going to get an energy tick in the next second or so. Tiger's Fury. Now you've got a buffed couple of shreds, and your auto attacks. Yeah, you absolutely should use it. So your sort of overall how you're going to play. So you're going to have this helmet that I'll put on now. So Wolf's Head Helm. This is part of the requirement for the rotation. So Wolf's Head Helm plus your natural energy ticks plus Furor from talents equals 80 energy when you shapeshift. So again, there's people who are watching any time in energy ticks with an energy bar. I don't do that because I know not the majority of the time. I know when I use an ability, if I'm going to shapeshift afterwards, the thing that enabled me to use that ability was an energy tick. I hope that makes sense. So if you're on 100 energy and you use a shred, it's going to cost 48 energy, and then you use a second shred, you're not going to wait for an energy tick because that's now going to be 96 energy. So you'll have 4 energy left. So even if you get an energy tick at the second that you shapeshift, you're still better off for it. Because if you wait for an energy tick after your 2 shreds, you're now, still not going to have enough to shred. I'm hoping that makes sense. So you're going to shapeshift anyway. So after that time, once you shapeshift, your energy goes up, you'll do another 2 shreds. Or if you've been lucky with crits, you might just do a shred, then a ferocious bite, and then you shapeshift instantly again. But you're always shapeshifting after an energy tick or before an energy tick. That's redundant because you're not going to have the energy to use an ability anyway, and you're not going to stand there doing nothing and wait for 2 energy ticks. So I don't actually see the benefit in using a timer for this. Instead, what I recommend is, for example, let's pretend nothing crits. Let's pretend you get 1. Well, let's say you got 25% crit chance. So you're going to get 1 crit. So you're going to go in and you're going to shred, power shift. So now you've got 2 combo points. You're up to 80 energy again. You'll shred, you've now got 3. You'll shred, you've now got 5. But you've got no energy. Now, because you was on 80 when you shapeshifted in, let's say you was on 80, yeah, when you shapeshift, but when you power shifted the first time, you've then shredded to below 48 energy, which is how much a shred costs. So the next energy tick you get, you will use a shred. Now you may as well power shift. You don't need a timer to see when you're going to get a tick, because you had a tick, you used shred, then you instantly power shift. So you will power shift to 80 energy, maybe within half a second. Now you can shred again, ferocious bite, and that's the rotation's it's very difficult for me to say do it exactly like this, because it's all it all comes down to crits. It comes down to omen of clarity, clear casts as well. So you never want to use ferocious bite on a clear cast because it uses all of your energy, excess energy past the 35 that it costs to actually cast. So you always want to shred, even if you're on 5 combo points and you're on 90 energy or you're on 80 energy, and then you get a clear casting proc, you'll shred. But then you also won't use ferocious bite at 80 energy. So there's these times where you have to think on your feet, and this is where add-ons like weak auras or tell me when comes in handy, because I have I use everything audibly. So I've got a big coin sound that's made when I get clear casting. So if I'm just about to press ferocious bite but then I get a clear cast, I know, no, bang, quick, I'll waste that clear cast on shred first. Now I might have had an energy tick. So I could have been on 5 combo points and I've used another 2 shreds, because if I'm on 80 energy, 5 combo points just after a clear cast, I'm still not going to ferocious bite. I'm going to shred the energy down a little bit, then ferocious bite. That will drain my energy, bang, straight into a power shift. So it's a very sort of reactive rotation. I suppose that's how I would call it, because I can tell you the basics. So the basic is you more or less want to use 2 globals, then power shift, if you was getting no clear casts and no procs or anything. So it's about having the tools. So using the likes of Here Kitty and Tell Me When and Weak Auras to help you manage what you should do in different situations. So let's just say a standard fight, I would be running in. While I'm running in, I'll pretend that there's no other Druid in the group. So as I'm running in, I'll put Tiger's Fury up, I'll Fairy Fire on the way in, and then, again, for explanation purposes, we'll say that I've not got any crits. So I'll go Shred, Power Shift, Shred, Power Shift, Shred, Ferocious Bite, Power Shift. Start again. So I was gonna say a perfect world, but in an imperfect world, because obviously we want those crits, we want those omen of clarity procs. But in an imperfect world where we get none of that, that is the rotation. Shred, Power Shift, Shred, Power Shift, Shred, Ferocious Bite, Power Shift, and hopefully you'll be at 80 energy again. Again, there's going to be people who are going to hate some of the things I've said here, because they'll be like, oh no, like you'll be wasting energy. If you're not watching the energy tick timer, you could potentially get an energy tick and then power shift. For me, as I say, if I'm getting an energy tick, but I have to wait for a second energy tick to actually use an ability, that's a waste. I'd rather waste that 25 energy and be able to power shift and go bang, shred straight away. And then the next energy tick is going to allow me to shred a second time. Whereas you're potentially going to wait another 2 seconds after that, the first tick. You're going to stay in cap form for another 2 seconds before you can use one shred to then power shift, to then shred, to then wait, to then shred again. Again, this is quite complicated, really, to explain. It just comes with practice, and eventually, if you're using Here Kitty, you'll just know by sound what you should be doing. But if you want to just go absolute basic, if you wanted to just stand behind a boss, forget everything, you could pretty much shred, power shift, shred, power shift, shred, ferocious bite, power shift. Even with crits, even with clear casting procs, you will do good damage. Or you'll do reasonable damage. But to optimally perform, you have to react to those crits. So when you get that crit and you've now doubled your combo points, you need to be aware. And whether that's you looking at your UI or going by sound like I do, you can get very lucky and just go shred. You might get a couple of clear casts in a row and a couple of crits. So you just go shred. You're now at 4 combo points and maybe still nearly full energy because of clear casting procs. So what do? What you do is you shred again. You might crit or you might get a clear cast. Sometimes you find it difficult to dump your energy. Don't get me wrong, it's an absolutely lovely situation to be in, and it rarely happens. But when it does, you need to know, what can I do here to get the most damage out? Because your instinct will probably tell you, I'm at 5 combo points, ferocious bite. But that's not what you want to do, because if you ferocious bite, all of that energy has now been wasted. It may be contradicting myself saying that I don't mind wasting 20 odd energy, but don't waste it like that, not when you compress an ability. So you could, if you're on 90 energy, you've had a lucky string of clear casting procs, you can shred, you might get another clear cast, shred again, but don't ferocious bite just because you're on 5 combo points, because you'll get to use the 5 combo points. It's better to waste the gain of a couple of combo points than waste nearly a full energy bar on a 5-point ferocious bite. So, really brief recap. Always use shred on clear casts. Always shred again, even if you're at 5 combo points, if you're going to have enough energy afterwards to ferocious bite, which, yeah, or even if you had to wait a second or less than a second for an energy tick, and it will just come second nature. Now, I did actually intend on doing a gearing section at the end as well, looking at BIS lists for sort of pre-raid all the way up to, well, every phase of the game, looking at the items in detail. But I'm quite conscious this video's probably dragged on a bit longer than your average guide already, so if you like the video, like and subscribe, and hopefully if this video gets enough love, I'll do a separate gearing video next week. Cheers.